Hello there, Delvers. Welcome back to the Vaults Remastered. So you want to make yourself a homebrewed ancestry, and why not? It's probably one of the most fun parts of homebrewing, creating your own game world is putting together something playable that one of your player characters can choose. One of your players can choose to make a PC, right? Yeah, they're choosing wizards and warriors and rogues and all this other stuff, but what species, what race, what ancestry in Pathfinder terms is it? So today we're going to talk about one of the specimens that I'm creating for my homebrewed game, the Vaults of the UnderEarth, and that is the Ignaruk. And this one is special because it is coming to you straight out of hell. And I've put together 9 steps that I go through my process of getting from, blank page scratch to final product that I'm ready to throw out on the table. And these first 9 steps are just talking about the playable lore side of the equation, not the actual mechanics. I'm going to get into that later in a subsequent video, and all the heritages and all the feats and stuff that go with it. Today, this video is all just about the story that you can create with these homebrewed ancestries. So I want to go through my process of how I go about doing this. So without further ado, let's get into it. And that is step 1. What's your goal? You need to set your design goals. What is it that you want this creature, this creation to be able to do? So for me, my game role, it's based upon a Darklands Underdark analog setting that I call the Vaults of the UnderEarth. And so I wanted an orc species that fits this game world. Everybody knows what an orc is, right? But I wanted one that's, subterranean Darklands. It's for me will have originated on the surface of my game world, but it's adapted to the elements down here. Everything in my game world is stony and fire, the volcanic stuff, the magma, lava, as well as darkness. So I needed a creature that could fit that description as well. Also, I wanted to go with this brimstone flavor, I'm calling it. And that is, it's volcanic, it's magmatic, seismic, and that's based on and tied into their main deity, their god, known as Vulculus, who's the Lord of the Earth, the Lord of the earthquakes, volcanoes, that stuff. Then I wanted to have that this species, this race, this ancestry is deeply spiritual. Strong, followers of an elemental and ancestral religion. They have shamans as their priests. The religion is known as the Kamlik. Then I wanted them to be a tribal community. So they have like a warrior chief as one of their leaders, and then a shamanistic priest as another leader. And overall, they kind of fit that standard orc, mentality: savage, brutal, barbaric by nature, and amplified by the circumstances, which is what gives them actual justification. Look, I made myself too big here. Shrink myself down. They're justified in what it is they're doing. So not just savage or brutal by nature. I'm kind of getting into the whole concept that the Pathfinder Remastered has done, which is getting away from alignment, getting away from things that are just evil and born that way, or good and born that way. No, these Ignaruk, these brimstone orcs, they are justified by their circumstances, which is something that I'm going to get into as part of this background, part of this lore. So something's been done to them that sets up why they're so brutal. All right, that's step 1. What are your goals? Step 2 is inspiration. It's always great to have an idea that you can, steal from and build upon. For me, I started this quest by looking for, Underdark or Subterranean or, Darklands orcs. Is there a sub race out there in D&D or Pathfinder or some other game system that fits the bill, fits that description? And sure enough, I found one in D&D. And it goes all the way back to second edition in the Monstrous Manual. And third edition, the Races of Faerun, and then fifth edition, of course, is in the Monster Manual on page 245, and that is the Orog. This is D&D's subterranean, underdark version of the orc. And if you look at the description in fifth edition, this is a little snippet of it. Orogs, they're orcs that are blessed with this surprisingly keen intellect, so they're smarter than the average orc. And it's a gift of the orc goddess Luthik. And Luthik, they live underground. Although scarcity of food, blah, 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 brings them to the surface. So, long story short, they're a subterranean orc race subrace that worships this underdark, god Luthik that lives underground. And there's more to it than that, but 5th edition, if anybody's followed the older editions, 5th edition has, cut out a lot of the lore and stuff. The stat block you see is the one that you're going to find in the monster manual. And it's fairly, I hate to say dull, but it is. Because really, what is special here about this Orog? They've got dark vision, great. And they have the aggressive trait, which, I think probably the regular orc has this as well. So there's really nothing unique here in the stats, even though these things are under darky D&D. But if you go and dig deeper, Monsters Faerun, this is the 3rd edition installment of the Orog. On page 71 through 73, there's 3 pages practically all about Orog's history, their society, their racial stats, lots of different stuff. I borrowed heavily, and I'm not afraid to say it, not ashamed of it, I borrowed heavily from this inspiration. And kind of that's why a little sidebar here. That's why I'm disappointed in 5th edition overall, because they took out so much of this old stuff that there was tons of lore in these old, 2nd edition, 3rd edition, 4th edition books that was just dropped when 5th edition came out 10 years ago. But the good news for my Pathfinder friends out there, 3rd edition, 3.5 edition D&D was the birth of Pathfinder, was its inspiration of 1st edition. So things like the Orog and stuff and the patterns you see in the amount of lore and stuff that's given does carry over into modern Pathfinder, even 2nd edition. But anyway, just wanted to throw this out there. My inspiration comes from a D&D source. And it's then, of course, been brought into Pathfinder. And I'm going to show you how I go about converting it. But this is where I'm starting, right? Then my 3rd step here is I take that information from these old sources, I combine it with my information from my game world, I'm targeting my goals for this creation, and I come together or put it together into an immersive lore section, the mythology and the stories, right? So what I'm trying to do here is establish the Ancestry's place, its role in my game world. What is this Ignaruk supposed to do, supposed to be? What's its purpose? Where did it come from? So I need an identity, a name, right? Ignaruk. I need a summary, a history, its origin, its backstory. Where does this whole, ancestry derive from? What's its role in the game world, past and present? What are the myths? What are the legends? What are the stories around this ancestry? The more you can build, the more use you'll find in other parts of your game. Because you're not just creating your lore here for, just yourself, right? This is also for the players, because ultimately it's the player characters that are, becoming the Ignaruk, that are embracing this lore as their characters are created. So you're giving them a lot of information, a lot of fuel to burn. All right, then for me, when I went through this process, I came up with a whole bunch of stuff for my Ignaruk, but it boils down to these bullet points here. For me, my Ignaruk, they descended from a group. They're no longer known as the Skullbiters. That would have been 3rd edition D&D. They are now known as, drumroll, Deathmaw, the Deathmaw tribe. And the Volklands is a surface world location in my game world. And they're renowned warriors under Payenka during the Dark Tide. If you want to know more about Payenka and the Dark Tide, I talk about her during my Ahriman series. So if you want to check out some of my playlists known as the Primordials of the Vaults, subscribe to the channel, go check out that playlist. I also mentioned Payenka in my Weaveling video series, which again, like, subscribe, go to my playlist on the channel where I talk about the ancestries of the vaults. I'm going to be adding the Ignaruk videos to that list. But I talk about Payenka, this entity, this wandering spider. She would be a lolfish inspired deity, just to kind of throw that out there for the D&D people out in the audience right now. That's kind of the origin of that entity. But anyway, my Ignaruk, they descend from this Deathmaw tribe. They were warriors that were serving under Payenka during a epic battle war on the surface known as the Dark Tide. But they experienced the fall. After the defeat by Thoth and the banishment of Payenka, the Deathmaw, they were misled by their Droog allies, which are the Durgar of my game, and they are plummeted in this fiery chasm, landing in Avernus, hostile realm of hell. Hell in my game is another world, another planet that is accessible by various magical means or by elemental transport nodes in this case. So they are betrayed and thrown into hell. Survival. Few of these orcs, these death moths survive. And those who do have to adapt, of course, to this hellish environment, and they transform over centuries into the Ignaruk that I'm creating here. Their skin is blackened basalt, and they got like fiery veined blood running through their body. Uh, but at some point, after centuries of abandonment, betrayal, and trapped, their god Volculus, sends portents, sends signs out to them. This Lord of the Earth, their patron deity, and he communicates and says, now is the time to rise from hell. And he shows them the way, signaling that their punishment for their weakness, for their falling to this trickery is over, and it's time for them to redeem themselves. And they need to crawl and climb their way out of hell. So the climb is another signature event in the lore of this ancestry I'm creating. So guided by the signs of Volculus, the Ignaruk, they endure this perilous ascent up through what's known as the pit. They're climbing up through it, and the eye is the base, or the very pinnacle of this pit, this vertical shaft, and they emerge from the eye into a place known as the Great Grotto, which is located in my current game world, the Vaults, the subterranean Darklands, Underdark analog. So they arrive at the surface of the underworld, and once they get there, they're on a crusade designated by Volculus. He is commanding them to destroy the Seekers of the Black Well. That is the cult that the Droog, who betrayed them in ancient time, belongs to. And it's also the cult that betrayed Payenka, who is Volculus's daughter, who's known as the Wandering Spider, and she is imprisoned in this ever-shifting maze between worlds known as the Netherweft, and setting the stage. If they complete this, it sets the stage for their rise as the ultimate leaders of all orc kind. They will be brought to the surface as heroes, right? Conquering heroes. The Blood of the Eye. The Ignaruk, they rename themselves. They're reborn. They're no longer these death maw. They're no longer orcs. They are the Blood of the Eye, the Ignaruk. Since they've returned, and they just embrace this life. They are now relentless marauders around the Great Grotto, especially slaying Droog and any of these followers, these Darkwell believers. Unmatched savagery is another part of their lore. They're known by all these other peoples now. Extreme violence. They give no mercy. They take out the Droog on sight without asking questions, usually, especially if you're a seeker of the Dark Well. And they just have this reputation as absolute savages. But they are doing so with a purpose, right? Their god is commanding it. They're not necessarily evil, and the Droog have it coming. The Seekers of the Darkwell have it coming because they're the ones who betrayed and tricked this Deathmaw tribe way back in the day. They're the ones who are worshiping Volculus's other child, a son known as, who I'm using, Erzul, the fossilized king from Pathfinder game world, who betrayed his father, Volculus, and betrayed his sister, who is Payenka the Wandering Spider. Lots of lore, lots of backstory. Again, if you're interested in that stuff, like and subscribe. Put some comments down below. I can answer any questions. Go back and check out some of my playlist videos where I get into a lot of this lore. But I'm building the lore based upon my game world for this brand new Ancestry, which is based upon the Orog of D&D, right? So I'm reinventing this thing for my game world, and my players are having access to this information. And so hopefully you're looking at this going, yeah, there's a lot of cool information here. So imagine you're a player now and you're thinking of, hey, what should I create my new character, right? What can I do? Well, here's some information I'm providing you, a page or two of lore. And that's what I'm talking about here, actionable lore. So I'm creating actionable lore for my players. And I've talked about actionable, this adjective. I've used it in a few of my other videos as well, where I talk about actionable clues and actionable role playing. And the concept is this, that you have things you add to your game, especially a homebrew, that could just be info dumps. But actionable is the lore of the information is usable by you, by the players, to create quests, to create motivations, to create conflict. You can do something with it. There's die rolls involved, right? There might be religion checks or whatever it is, right? You have information that is usable. It's not just puked out at your players. So actionable lore, based upon what I'm creating here, I'm giving my players something to draw from, this whole backstory about the Ignaruk and their struggle and their transformation, so that if they're coming up with a character concept, now they have some ideas of how they can embrace this information to come up with motivations and this conflicted past that these poor Ignaruk, if you think about it, have to deal with. Also, from a GM perspective, this is actionable because now I have information, this epic history, all these myths that surround the Ignaruk, to design quests, to come up with ancient secrets. This legacy that they have, that, hey, why are they after Droog and why are they trying to kill all these secrets of the Darkwell? This whole effort of them to reclaim their former glory. I can now use this as a GM in my game world, whether it's for a PC or an NPC. I've got the lore. I've created this ancestry that has all this juicy information, right? All right, next step, providing perspective. So you've created the stories, this backstory, this lore. Well, now you want to create the lens that you and players can view the world through, whether you're playing an Ignaruk or you are meeting one. So most of this part of the backstory stuff that I create for an ancestry, I look at the common behaviors and traits that members of the ancestries would believe represents themselves, or that they would exhibit, how they would describe themselves. And by the way, this template, this layout that I'm talking about, this is originally derived from third edition D&D. When you go and look at the pages I referenced a few minutes ago, that original Orog, it started back then, and Pathfinder has adopted that. So if you're looking at modern Pathfinder 2E, in the player core and in the player's handbook, in before the remaster, the ancestry sections are broken into these little subsections. So I'm no genius here, right? I'm taking what the game system Pathfinder is providing, which has its origins in these older versions of D&D and whatnot. So this is one of the sections, perspectives. How would these Ignaruk see themselves? So I put that into this section, as well as what kind of perspectives or prejudices would outsiders have about this ancestry. I already gave you that idea that, man, people are going to see them as savage, brutal, killers, right? They themselves might see themselves as justified, like this is compensation for betrayal. So you can see how you creating this lens is going to allow you to give your players a POV on your game world, and you yourself can use it for NPCs, for conflicts, that sort of thing. Now, for my Ignaruk, what I came up with was the following: that you might, if you were an Ignaruk, well, you would eagerly meet any chance to prove your strength in a physical contest. These guys are all about the fight. You believe that lies and treachery are for those who lack the strength to seize what they want. So that harkens back to the Droog betrayal of them and the whole betrayal of their god Volculus. So you could see, as a player character now, you would hate people that lie, potentially, if you want to go down that angle. You would view dying in this glorious combat as preferable to just some mundane death from old age or illness. So that would give you incentive as a player with this character to dive into a fight, not just sit there and, oh well, I got sick, I'm gonna die now, or I got to go back and retire. There's no retirement. What are you kidding? And then others would probably view you as violent, lacking discipline. You're a savage. They think you're dumb, you lack cunning, that you're just ignorant, but to their own detriment, of course. But some might actually admire you because you're just forthright. You say it the way it is. You're bluntly honest. You don't have time for games and lies, whatever. You just say it. All right, and then as far as actionable versions of this, right, actionable perspectives, players already hinted at this. They're now able to consider how an Ignaruk might interact with other races, other ancestries, other societies, how they're going to be influenced by, these prejudices, or how, they're influenced by admiration of them. So if you're creating an Ignaruk as a player character, or as a player encountering one as an NPC, you have some idea now of how you're supposed to act, or how you're thought you're going to be acting. And as a GM, of course, this gives you that lens that you're able to design conflicts or alliances that could pop up in gameplay. So if you have a player character, let's say is a Droog, and they encounter your NPC Ignaruk, you can see why there's going to be hostility immediately between those two, or at least from the Ignaruk side of that conversation. So it allows you to create that conflict, that quest, or whatever it is, because you already have the information at hand. Okay, you're not guessing every time there's a new encounter. Oh, how's this guy going to act? There's already prejudices. There's already stereotypes built into your ancestry that you're creating. All right, let's move on to the next step. You want to get some sort of, evocative description. This is what it looks like. This is how it's going to act type of thing. So you're coming up with visuals. You're coming up with great descriptions. So as example here, you're trying to explain how this ancestry typically would appear in your game world. And this is one thing that's really cool about homebrewing, because you can homebrew to your specific climate, your specific geography, your specific, diplomatic scenarios, cultural stuff, what people are wearing, dressing, all that stuff. Where, if you take something out of a published book, you're sort of stuck with what's in the book already. Like, oh, wood elf, oh, they look like what it says in the book. But maybe your woods are, jungly woods or something like that. Or, I don't know, right? You have to reimagine it. So if you're creating your ancestry from scratch, you have the power to do that. Physical traits would be this section as well, right? Height, weight, coloration, other outward stuff. These Ignaruk, they're very volcanic looking. They're very, cracked skin. A lot of them. They have like fishery veining pattern tattoos, or scarification. They engrave their own sort of hardened, stony flesh. And they've kind of got these magmatic or volcanic lines, like you can see here at this picture of a female Ignaruk. Gender, age, regional variations. You can come up with different shapes and sizes, that depending on how old something is, what gender it is, which part of your game world it's in, blah, 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 etc. For my game, my Ignaruk, what I came up with was, already mentioned this a little bit, they're big, right? These guys are tall, they're broad, they're comparable in size to the Velik. In my game, that it would be the equivalent of like the Goliath. So the subterranean under-earth Goliaths are known as Velik. They would be like stone giant based or fire giant based. Skin tones, pale gray like volcanic ash, glossy black like obsidian, accented with the fiery red streaks like I already mentioned. Eyes and ears, large char-colored eyes. They're adapted to see in the dark. They're adapted to see in the smoke and the ash. Uh, Big, proportionally large ears, so they can detect, slightest sounds amidst the environmental noise of like tremors and bubbling lava and that sort of thing. Because you got to picture where they came from, right? They were in hell. They were on Avernus, and it was, toxic and volcanic, and they were being hunted. And then they climbed for centuries up through this pit, this shaft, this fire node to emerge from the eye. Okay, all that stuff has evolved them to the form that they are today. Hair, their scent, most of them are bald because, they don't have hair, it's burning away. Or if they do have hair, it's like kind of like dark and tar-like hanging back. They have like a sulfury, brimstone smell about them, just that hellish stink all around them. Adaptations, rocky, crusty skin. It's thickened and hardened from the heat, from the acid, the ash, all that stuff. Toxic gases. They have to be tough. They have to be hardened because they were being preyed upon by these, infernal predators the whole way, and just all the toxic and volcanic environmental exposures. It was not a pleasant experience at all. Attributes, they had to be strong, they had to be resilient, muscular, warriors. Okay, and their skin cracks aren't seen as like ugliness or age, they're seen as beauty marks. They're telling their stories of survival, of battles that they've won. Okay, so that is like a badge of honor to them. They've got tusks and they like scarify or carve their face, like I said. They might wear, bones and things of things they've killed. This is all attractive to them, right? Very, very showy stuff that they'll, pierce their ears, nose, foreheads, whatever. Put stuff through their tusks, hang things off their tusks, hang stuff from their tar hair, right? What others might consider ugly, they believe is beauty. All right, actionable description. What could you use this description for? Two different things, right? From the player side of things, it now allows you as a player to visualize this character. You can start to come up with descriptions for your character. You don't have to rely upon some movie version of a dwarf or a halfling or whatever, right? You can come up with your own game world description, and as a player now, you can tailor fit your character to these guidelines that are given in this ancestry that your GM is creating. And as the GM, of course, you now can use this to create these really cool descriptions for NPCs, to give those really cool encounters that you can talk about. Because now you can start talking about those piercings and the carvings and stuff. Because maybe you don't have a player who's chosen Ignaruk, but they encounter one and they have all these scars that the person, maybe they see the person carving in their own head after some fight and say, "What the hell are you doing?" It's like, "It's a badge of honor." Rah. And they're just carving some, like the outline of the creature they just killed. They're, it's almost like cave art for them, but it's their own body. Okay. All right, next step is create a believable society. You're trying to create a story here with these ancestries. And this is the shame, I think, of, modern D&D 5e has really stripped a lot of this back. Pathfinder has done a much better job, but even they've kind of scaled back a little bit in the remaster. I thought was a little bit leaner than it used to be. Um, older stuff always seems to have way more, or when they get into when they put extra books out, there's plenty of lore in those. But anyway, the society is something important you want to add to your ancestry because your player characters want to have backstory, right? This is going to help them create a backstory because who knows the world better than you, the GM? So if you can provide your player characters not with just a cool, stat block for your ancestry, with just some numbers, you've got a whole story. You've got that lore that we already talked about. You got those descriptions. You got those lens filters that they're looking through for their beliefs and that sort of thing. What about their society, right? How do they gather and live? How do they work and interact? What are their cultural practices? What are their traditions? What's their family structure like? Social hierarchies, governmental organization, leadership constructs. All this stuff that, we as humans, we have society, right? So what about the stuff you're creating for your game world? The diet, the habitat, things they eat, places they would live, their houses, what do they look like? What kind of apparel, what kind of clothing, what kind of jewelry, what kind of, perfume are they wearing? All the stuff is fodder for creativity and giving your players and you, the GM, lots of stuff to use as you're designing your game or just running encounters, creating quests, prepping sessions. For my Ignaruk, what I came up with for this was the Society of the Ignaruk, they value pain, they value glory, and they respect others who bear pain stoically as much as somebody who's won a battle. If you're wounded and you're still walking, they're like, oh, strong, okay, strength and honor. And they operate as a martial theocracy. They blend their religious doctrine, this really devout worship of Volculus, with the martial leadership, with war. And power is divided between a chief, who's the strength, and the grand shaman, who's like their ancestral lineage, spellcaster, summoner type of person. Leaders in my game, I've got a guy named Chief Korgath. He's the one who led these guys out of hell, right? He's the one who led the climb up through the pits and emerged first from the eye. And the Grand Shaman Drakel or Drakel, Drakel. I got to figure out how to pronounce that. He's the one who handles the spiritual matters. He's the one interpreting the portents that Volculus is sending in the smoke, in the ash. He's the one who's interpreting the tremors and is commanding the volcanic elements of seismic activity and choking smoke and blinding ash and uh, face melting magma, plus the ancestral spirits, which I'll talk a little bit more in the belief section that's coming up. But the other interesting thing that I came up with these Ignaruk is that they're sterile. They cannot have offspring. They cannot have children. Their exposure to all this toxicity uh, in hell on Avernus up through the pit has sterilized them. So this is a major, major threat to the tribe. They can't have any more. They can't procreate. So their numbers are going to be always dwindling anytime one of them dies. So death is a big deal for them and their tribe, which ties into their ancestral spirit worship because as a warrior dies or member of the tribe dies, the shamans are responsible for collecting that spirit energy, that ancestral energy, and merging it in back into the tribe through this their faith known as the Camlic. The Cam is like their elemental, the spiritual energy that they're able to wield and command. Shamanic practice, mentioned this already. The shamans, they're specializing, of course, in medicine because they got to keep their warriors alive. They don't want people dying. They have limited numbers. The spiritual practices focus on the health, the combat injuries. Not so much. Yeah, they definitely avoid arcane and occult. They kind of see this as taboo or evil, and they view it as weakness. Like if you're relying upon kind of like bookie magic or other things to do your fighting for you, you're weak, you're feeble. If you don't channel the energy yourself, like primal or Volculus granted it to me, that is the true strength. This is sissy magic. No, they would probably smash your head in or kill you if they saw you reading some wizard book. So think about that, from a player perspective. If a player wants to be one of these Ignaruk, wants to play a wizard, they now have a potential conflict because they would be interpreted or seen as weak by their own tribe, distrusted, right? So that would play into that character's creation big time. Cultural artifacts. The warriors are going to be using hell-forged weapons and wearing armor with basalt and lava motifs. So they got like maybe rocky plates. They've got, the motifs on the outside that are maybe painted, or maybe it's some sort of actual mystical, trails of lava flowing through it if it's some sort of magic. They're going to have war banners and totems that are crafted from the hides of the fiends that they've slain on their way up the climb, monster skulls of these things that were hunting them that they then killed. Kind of think like Predator, like the movie Predator, right? They kind of see them like that a little bit, where their victories are the skulls and these trophies of these creatures they've slain. Conflicts. Already mentioned this. This blood of the eye. This is the name of the tribe, right? They battle the Black Hammer. That is the Droog's military operation. That is the military wing of the Seekers of the Dark Well, that cult. And they are trying to destroy the city of Pedestal. That is where the cultists of the Seekers of Darkwell and the Black Hammer are, that's like their headquarters. And the Blood of the Eye, these Ignaruk, they live outside of that area in the wild tunnels of the Great Grotto, and they're trying to get into that city and raise it to the ground. In the current version of my game, they have ultimately breached because the city itself has collapsed into the lower vault chambers due to a cataclysmic event that preceded the current game. And again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you need to go and like and subscribe, because I had a video series about recasting, redoing my entire game world. It's one of the first sets of videos I put out there, and I talk about how I've destroyed my own game world. I blew it up, my old world, that 5e D&D game, and I'm remastering it here in a Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And they also are seeking allies amongst the Morshael, which would be my Dark Elves that live on Ricarian Island, and are actual followers of Payenka, although they don't realize that Payenka is necessarily this orcish Ignaruk Payenka. Whole nother story. Anyway, final thing here about the society that I came up with is that destiny concept. The idea that the Ignaruk believe they were destined to survive. They were destined to ascend from hell. This was preordained. They are doing Volculus's will. And they're anticipating that when they take out the Droog and the Black Hammer and the Seekers of the Darkwell, there's going to be such a massive quake, this glorious, outburst of energy, because the Volculus is going to be so pleased with his blood of the eye followers here. He's going to crack open the earth and let them rise back to the surface, glorious conquerors of the whole world, right? That's their belief system. So actionable, lots of things you can act upon here as a player. Now you start to see all these societal roles. You start to see the expectations that these Ignaruk have been growing up with throughout their life. You can see that, hey, they don't have children. This is going to help you create a really deep character, knowing all this stuff, having a worldview, and help you start to come up maybe some skills you would choose as you're building your character. From a GM, same kind of idea. I have all this societal information. I have all this cultural information now. I'm going to be able to make the settings more believable, more like alive. You're going to have the ability to throw in there some political intrigue. Maybe there's some conflict between the shamans and the warriors or something like that. Maybe there's somebody, heresy out there. You don't believe in Volculus, you must, be sacrificed or whatever. Or maybe there's quests that you can build based upon the society's needs. Okay, there's lots of things in that whole society section that you're creating that you could just dip into over and over and over again as a GM. All right, step 7, give your ancestry a belief system. They don't necessarily have to believe in or worship a deity of some sort, but give them some sort of faith, some sort of belief, some sort of construct, societal construct that they have faith in. And maybe it's just capitalism or something like that. Whatever, give them a belief system. So in a fantasy world, of course, religion, right? My game has religions. They're all known as cults down here. I kind of reserve the word religion for the god worshippers, where I call cults the primordial worshippers. And primordials are the main deities, the main entities of divine power in my subterranean world. The gods are all in the heavens above the surface of the world. But anyway, this section, religious practices, faith systems. What deities are being worshipped? What philosophies are followed? What places and practices might be sacred to these people? What are some important holidays? Displays of spirituality. Again, you can start to see how these things would tie into player characters, especially if you're going into sort of the divine side of things, right? And you look for things to worship. But again, not necessarily. You definitely could have, warriors who are looking up to their god just for the blessings to, be strong in the next combat, or, claim many skulls in the next battle, whatever the case may be. And then it's also a unique thing with Pathfinder now. They've gotten rid of the alignment, and they focus a lot more on edicts and anathemas, things that you would, be supportive or positive. Your edicts, things that you follow, where anathemas are the things that you are like taboo, you wouldn't do them, they're like bad to do. So what are those lists of things that the average member of the Ignaruk ancestry would believe in? In my system, again, my game world came up with some ideas for this. Faith in Volculus, that's like paramount, right? Unshakable belief. I mean, the only reason they got out of hell is because Volculus deemed them worthy enough, and they will not disappoint him. So they are to the bone hardcore. And it shapes all different aspects of their society, weapons, armor, beliefs, rituals, you name it. Dedication. They are dedicated to getting rid of, eradicating the Seekers of the Dark Well. That is like priority number one. So if you're a player character and you're picking one of these Ignaruk, this should be in your mind. Droog, Seekers of the Dark Well, the fossilized king Erzul, must kill, must destroy. You want to be combating, or if you're building a character who doesn't hold those strong feelings, why not? What's your explanation? What's going on there? Also, there's the side quest, the side belief in Payenka and her imprisonment in the Netherweft and needing to be rescued. This is another commandment from Volculus to his followers. You must free my daughter. And he has a subsect of his believers that are like, these seeker types that are out there pledged to find her and free her. Secret reverence. Some of the Ignaruk secretly worship Payenka. Now, you might say, why wouldn't they openly worship Payenka? Even though Payenka is the daughter of Volculus, Volculus still is the man. So, worshiping Payenka openly, this wandering spider entity, would be courageous and valuable, but if you get too big for your britches, so to speak, the shamans, the worshippers there of Vulcus might see this as blasphemous, like you're giving too much credit, too much of yourself to Payanka. That's bad. It's one thing to try to find and rescue her in the name of Volculus, but to worship her directly, that would be seen as probably blasphemous. Relics of the Climb is another big, thing about their belief structure. This whole journey up through the pit from Avernus, up through the pit, emerging from the eye itself. They're gonna have collection, things they would have gathered along the way, relics, rocks, uh, not demons, but devils, right? The infernal predators that were hunting them. These things would have spiritual significance to them. Souvenirs, you might think of them, but souvenirs of this journey of survival that took centuries. And then, anything like from the rim of the eye itself, if you manage to get, like, let's say, some chunks of the volcanic rock there and fashion into a weapon, that would be important. The eye itself is a sacred site. This is like where their tribes, war camp is centered around the eye. Prophecies is another big part of their belief system. Volculus's guidance. He's supposedly he's talking to the shamans through the smoke, through the ash patterns, through the vibrations, through the way the magma flows, and of course only the shamans can interpret this. That leads to potential conspiracy stuff. Are they telling the truth? Or they got their own little politics going on? But it's a huge major driving point for the tribe, right? Volculus commands, I have seen his portents in the smoke this morning. We must assault the eastern wall of the city. Urgh! Rituals, sacred ceremonies that reenact the escape from hell, the climb from the pit, other things like Volculus's battles, maybe Payenka's, wandering. All of these things can have, religious significance, importance, and just the fact that they are emerged. This would be like an anointing process because maybe new Ignaruk might escape periodically, and as they arrive from hell, they're greeted, with much fanfare. Again, you can build huge stories around this stuff, and your player characters can build lots around it. Funerary rites is another one because, again, death is a big deal. Okay, and a lot of sort of warrior culture, well, it's another body, another person died. Hey, death is, part of the warrior culture. And while it is, the fact that they're sterile and they have a finite population makes death super important. So they're going to have special funerary rites that are going to allow them to collect those souls, the spirits of those warriors, and reuse it, recycle it as part of this cam, this power, this ancestral and volcanic elemental energy to empower the living members of the tribe. This is what the shamans are doing through the faith known as the Kamlik. Actionable beliefs from this. Players, they're going to be able to integrate the religions and the philosophy if they're playing an Ignaruk character, or maybe they're playing an ancestry that was associated with the Ignaruk. It allows them to have motivations for their characters. It's going to give them motivations for their conflicts as they're thinking of, hey, my faith says I need to slay these Droog, but the Droog is my friend. Oh, what should I do? Right, that moral dilemma. GMs, deep-rooted beliefs in these prophecies that these Ignaruk, believe. These are plot hooks, right? These are quests you can set your players out on. Even if it's not the PC themselves, you can have an NPC Ignaruk, telling the players, we believe in a certain thing. We need you to go and get some of the sacred stone that's still down in the pit. And it's a couple miles down, and we need you to descend back down there and reclaim maybe some body of some, heroic Ignaruk that was, some last stand. We need you to go down there and retrieve them. All right, that could be a quest. All right, step 8 into the home stretch here. Naming conventions, right? Now, this might seem kind of like silly. Wait, you're going to tell players how to name, whatever. You're not telling them how to name, but you're giving them some ideas. You're coming up with a naming system because I think this is important. You have society and beliefs and all this cultural stuff you've created already for your ancestry, and naming comes out of those established constructs for your ancestry. So if you can come up with some guidance on names or titles and that sort of thing that your players can use, it's going to allow them to create a character that's more in tune with the game world, and it's not going to break immersion because, I don't know, maybe that's just me, but if you have a certain naming system that you have like amongst the Ignaruk, they're all they have to be very guttural, that kind of stuff. And somebody's like, "Oh, my character's name is Jimmy, Jimmy the Ignaruk," right? It sounds ridiculous. I'm sorry. And I might put my GM foot down for something like that. Say, hey, listen, maybe that's your nickname is Jimmy, but can you actually have like an Ignaruk name that's, a proud name? Or if it is Jimmy, why? Was this some, adopted kid or something like that, Ignaruk, that was named Jimmy by his adopted parents because they don't know the culture of the Ignaruk? But if it's a, true blood Ignaruk who came up from hell through this whole process, they're not going to just be calling themselves Jimmy. No. Okay, you kind of ruins it, in my opinion. So your naming system's influenced by the cultures and traditions. You're going to include honorifics, titles, stations, perhaps. You can provide sample names, males, females, gender neutral, etc., etc. You're giving your players something to compare to, and they can come up with their own name at that point. But at least you're giving them some ideas that fit the culture. They fit the game world. So for me, my Ignaruk, I came up with this naming system derived from Orcish. Their dialect is a little bit different, of course, because they've been down here so long, but very harsh, volcanic landscapes, and this whole survival thing has characterizes their naming and their speech patterns. So very guttural, very forceful tones they're going to use in their speech. So first names should embody things like strength, resilience, ferocity. Got some example names for males and females here. I'm not going to read all these, but just gives you some ideas here. So they're kind of just, Arcus, Ausk, Skara, Pruga, right? They're very just pop, pop, couple syllables. They're not very, sibilant and airy sounds like you might have with, let's say, with an elf. These are very just guttural, punchy, like stone. Some of them might be violent sounding. It fits the Ignaruk lifestyle. Surnames are going to reference the tribe, their hold, commemorate significant deeds or events. Naming ceremonies could be a big thing, especially if like somebody is reborn from the eye. You can kind of see that being a thing because they don't have births anymore. Or maybe if somebody dies and is resurrected somehow, or hits death's door, maybe there's a naming or rebirth ceremony for that. Hey, you're back. You only hit death. What is it? I forget what it's called. Gosh, wounded. You got wounded 3.5. Man, you're back. Right? Got a new name. Honorifics and titles. You can add prefixes and suffixes to your various names, like Krug means brave. So Krug Arcus, you're the brave Arcus. Gar's suffix could be added to, high ranking warriors. Dura, Gar. Sham or Sham is used for the shamans. So Shambruga, like an honorific title. A draw, survivors of a deadly encounter. Draw Olak, you have survived the attack by the Terra Leviathan. Thar, wise elders, advisors, they get this as a suffix. So you can give your players lots of fuel here, again, to come up with ideas, because that's probably something a lot of players might struggle with is, maybe have a loose idea for a character. You kind of know what ancestry you want to play, what class, background. Oh, what's my name? What's the name? You've got some things here that they can use to get inspired from. And then, of course, you can add a whole bunch of temporary or lifetime titles that are granted by special quests. The chief gives it to them. The grand shaman gives it to them because they perform some, heroic deed or whatever. Actionable naming, of course, you can kind of see where this is going. Players, this gives them a framework for coming up with names themselves that would have significance. So even if they come up with a name that has one of those suffixes, they can say tie that into a backstory and say, hey, I was given this name when I rescued so and so from falling in back down in the pit, and I was honored with this title. GMs, same idea, mostly for the NPC side of things. And also it allows you to kind of tie some of that lore in. So when a player character encounters a specific Ignaruk and you're saying, oh, their name is Murgathar, you know that, oh, if they do some sort of lore check or society check, they would know that suffix thar means this is an elder, this is an advisor, this is somebody who's high up in the hierarchy amongst the tribe. So you shouldn't talk trash to them or about them. So that's the useful information there. And then, of course, your final step is coming up with a section for your ancestry that rationalizes for your players and for you, the GM, why is this person becoming an adventurer in the first place, right? Because adventurer, that's a job, that's a career, and it's a dangerous one. So this section I put into my ancestries because I'm trying to give reasons, and this helps players with their backstory development. Why would you become an adventurer if you're an Ignaruk? I mean, you're supposed to dedicate yourself to the tribe and slaying Droog and these Seekers of the Darkwell. Why are you giving that up and joining this group of 3, 4, 5, 6 people to go and get loot from some ruins or some, ancient cavern somewhere, right? Plus, it's a very dangerous profession, and you might die not necessarily gloriously in battle. You might die to some pit trap that you fall in. So, why would an Ignaruk do this? What are the reasons for leaving? Not necessarily the comfort and security, but for them it would be that pride and tradition of their tribe to go to the unknown. What's the rationale? Also, I include suggestions for backgrounds from, Pathfinder lists of backgrounds. Hey, here are some likely backgrounds that Ignaruk would be known to do. Gladiators, uh, blacksmithing, armor type of people, whatever, right? Shaman. Okay, things that would based upon their beliefs, their society, their family, etc. Same thing for classes. I'll give a list of some classes that might be naturally, appealing to members of the Ignaruk ancestry based upon their history, their culture, society, religion, etc. And then for me, for my game, the Ignaruk, what I came up with was reasons were blood and glory, right? Many Ignaruk would be just driven by this primal allure of proving their strength. Maybe in the tribe, they're kind of the low man on the totem pole and they're not seen as very tough or strong. So they got to go out and prove themselves. So that's why they join this adventuring group because they want to go out and slay one of those, Leviathan creatures, or there's some, fiend is roaming around. They want to go slay it and get the glory for it. Autonomy. Maybe they're rebelling against the tribal hierarchy. They're like, this is BS. I'm tired of listening to the chief and the shaman and all this nonsense about Volculus. I want to live my own life, right? I'm a rebel with a cause. I want to make my own destiny. I want to start my own tribe. Whatever. They want to get out of there. Allure of the unknown. Uh, they're very spiritual people, the ancestors. So maybe there is some stories about other orc tribes, ancestors that were lost down here because the original orcs that were dropped down through the pit. Maybe there's stories that some of them survived that betrayal. They're trying to find them. Maybe there's mysteries of the earth and fire, the elements, these volcanic elements that a more mystical, shamanistic, primal based character might be interested in, and that's why they go after adventure. A duty. Maybe there's just a sacred duty that they have to undertake for the tribe, given by the chief, by one of the shamans. Redemption. Maybe they failed the tribe at some point and were exiled. They were kicked out. And they're looking for a second chance. They need to redeem themselves. Or maybe, like, you know what? There's no way I can go back to the tribe. I need to find a new tribe. And I need to prove myself to these people because they all think I'm a savage and I'm gonna eat their face. Legacy. Again, maybe this ties back into the tribe. Maybe it ties into the ancestors. They have a legacy of, slaughter and battle and being primal energy worship wielders. So they want to honor that, right? They're gonna carry on the legacy. Maybe one of the fallen was a relative of theirs who was slain by some creature, and now this is the son, and they want to go out and honor the legacy of their father or the mother, whoever was killed by this creature. Adventure roles. So some suggestions for my players who want to do an Ignaruk, of course, fighters, barbarians, martial type of characters, people that want to just embrace the strength and the power of the Ignaruk people. Rangers, uh, as they were doing this climb up through the pit, there would have been the advanced, groups of Ignaruk that were going up ahead in order to clear the way, or perhaps just to check out, see if there was danger lurking in any of the little nooks and crannies up through this vertical shaft. Great background stuff that would lead you to get into a ranger class. Clerics, of course, Volculus, maybe Payenka, right? You're into the spiritual, you're into that elemental stuff. Maybe Summoner fits in here for Pathfinder. Druids and sorcerers, that primal energy stuff, right? You're trying to embrace those volcanic energies, the spiritual energies, etc. You can see all kinds of, I'm thinking like Oracle might fit is for the spiritual stuff as well, the divine side of things. So there's lots of options that you could present in this section that a player who might really like the ancestry, but they're not sure what role they want to serve in the party, or maybe they're joining a party that's already established and like, yeah, I wanted to play a ranger, but there's already one in the team, so I want to play something else. What else could these Ignaruk be good at? You've given them some ideas here, right? And again, maybe they want to be a wizard, even though wizard is like, anathema to these Ignaruk. As long as the player has a good explanation and understands the prejudice and the hate that's going to come at them from their own kind, it can make a great character, a great story that the player comes up with. And then as far as what you can use this for is for actionable adventuring is, of course, the players now have reasons. You're giving them some ideas of, well, why would their character have left their homeland? What background might they have come from? What class are they planning on? Helps them to build that backstory so then when they come into your game, right, their character's already tied into everything. They've used the society, the beliefs, the lore, the naming. Now they've got some ideas for backgrounds and classes, right? It all just fits this ancestry that you've woven for them to use. And as GM, of course, you can use this for more plot hooks, for motivations for your characters. So maybe you have that character that wants to become redeemed, was exiled, whatever. That's a quest now you can give them, right? That's something that they can use as a personal goal, or maybe something that ties back into Volculus, or something that ties into their history of this climb. You've got all this cool stuff that you can use to throw at the characters and give them reasons for questing and taking on these adventures. All right, so let's wrap this up because we are dang 1 hour into this video because this is monolithic deep dive into this Ignaruk homebrewed ancestry. And bang, let's get into the final words. So here's your takeaways, right? As you're coming up with your own ancestries, your homebrew and stuff, think of it this way. Every element that you can put into it is a story that can be told. It's waiting to unfold. So don't be shy about adding details to your ancestries, right? It's not wasted writing or wasted creation. It's giving your players potential ideas. And even if nobody ever plays this Ignaruk, you could have an NPC play an Ignaruk, no problem. Your player characters can go to the Ignaruk, war camp or something like that. Every name you come up with, the place, the person, a belief, whatever, that is a potential legacy in the making. So if one of these Ignaruk dies, let's say, that's a legacy you've just created because they don't have kids. They can't have kids. Their tribe is going to honor them. So imagine you have a player character who's playing Ignaruk and they fall in battle during one of your adventures. Your party, imagine them bringing the body back to the tribe and the honor that would be bestowed upon them for making that journey. That's huge, right? Great fodder for story. And then the finished work, as you're putting this all together, you got this huge canvas now that's rich with potential. Players, right? They're going to be able to take a lot of this information and use it to embody their character with it, right? Now they're going to be able to flesh out this huge story wrapped around their character that ties into your specific homebrewed game world. GMs, it's allowing you to craft quests that are steeped in the lore that you've created and the societies that you've put together, the conflicts you've generated that ties into the player characters and NPCs in your game world. It's a lot harder to do that if you're using just some stock thing from the player core or whatever, because it's not yours. It doesn't necessarily tie into your story too well. It's a dwarf, okay, but it's not your dwarf, right? It's not your Droog dwarf. And ancestries, they not only provide you mechanical, uniqueness, right? I haven't even talked about the mechanics of this ancestry yet. That's going to be the next video. And if you want to see that next video, don't forget to like and subscribe to this one. Notify so that you know when the next one's going to drop. But you're creating this Ignaruk, and it's not just a bunch of numbers, right? I mean, that's the easy part. How many hit points it has, it's got what are its stat boosts, that kind of thing, what feat it might have. This is the good stuff, the lore, the beliefs, all this cultural stuff, because that's where the stories are being told, right? The stats, the mechanics, that's where the die rolling, that's where the action is happening in those sessions with encounters. But all the other sessions, the actual character creation process, which is a big thing a lot of your players enjoy, it's from this, right? So you're giving them not just mechanical stuff, but you're opening up doors for them to have a narrative. And it's going to be enriched every time they roll a die because it ties back into this bigger character, this bigger picture, this bigger story you've created. And then each step of this process that you go through, these 9 steps, right? It's not just going to give you the backdrop for the ancestry, but it's going to give you tools that's going to let you weave these stories together with the compelling characters all into this campaign that you're building. You're creating this mesh of information. So you got all this fun, cool stuff that you're able to dip into over and over again. And this is just one ancestry. If you're creating your own homebrew campaign with homebrew ancestries like I have, I'm going to end up ultimately having, because I'm cuckoo and stupid, I'm going to have like 24 different unique ancestries that fit into my game world, my vaults, my Darklands analog. Part of that's because Pathfinder, you never put out a Darklands supplement yet, and you're kind of getting rid of some of my favorite stuff like the Drow. What's going on with that? Anyway, bang, you make your own, guys and gals. Why not? It's your game. Go for it. All right, so that, my friends, is going to wrap up this video. If you liked it, subscribe, notify yourself, and if you're interested in seeing a fleshed out version of this at some point, let me know in the comments because I'm going to put together a big old juicy mechanic stuff as well in the next video. All right, have yourselves a good night and peace out.